The real money isn't in the vaccine. The real money is in the drugs that we get to sell you when you start to develop side effects. A long list of things like alopecia and depression and headaches. The real driver to the economic piece is through the vaccine. The vaccine, when you start getting sick, sends you to the doctor, then to the specialist, and then the super subspecialist, where then they order more and more and more tests, which you get more and more drugs. So the vaccines, even on the front end, as much as this is going to be multiple billions, and in my opinion, multiple trillions of dollars to vaccinate every person in the world multiple times, the real money is on the back end driver of the technology of tracking and making sure that you have this vaccine, and on the drugs that we get to sell when you start to develop side effects. So there's a plethora of studies out there dating all the way back to 2002 that shows that the development of coronavirus vaccines has been deadly and has never been approved by the FDA because they could never get it past the animal studies. So why would they ever want to do animal studies since they already know what the outcomes are? They're not good. Well, because we've got this liability protection and we can get it to the place where it's safe enough. Whoever decides that, I don't know about safety. The FDA just came out last week and said, if it gets to where it's effective 50-50, that if we give this vaccine, maybe 50% of the people will keep from getting sick, then we'll approve it. They just lowered that to saying now if it's 30% effective from keeping people get sick, we're going to release that all out onto the public. No animal studies. Animal studies killed people. We know that it's going to be fast-tracked into human trials. It's really, really dangerous.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, the American medical doctor, researcher, and author. You have invested 20 years and over 40,000 hours researching, documenting, and exposing the complex issues around vaccine development. You have worked as an emergency medicine physician and were director of a level 2 trauma center for over a decade. In our last interview, we discussed the dangers of a fast-track coronavirus vaccine and the questionable involvement of people like Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci. Today, we're here to talk about the destructive health impact of face masks, the shocking side effects from the recent Moderna COVID-19 vaccine trials, and the panic-inducing manipulation of quote-unquote positive coronavirus test results. Dr. Tenpenny, welcome back to London Real.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. It's my pleasure.
Great to have you here. You know, before we get started, I just want to announce that we're streaming now on our Digital Freedom platform, which is a censorship-free, independent broadcasting system that is of the people, by the people, for the people, and available exclusively on our website at freedomplatform.tv. Can everyone watching now please share this link via the sidebar to any and all of your social media channels? Let me repeat that. Can everyone watching now please share this link via the sidebar to all of your social media channels? This is important. Simply ask your friends and family to give us 15 minutes and then they can decide. Dr. Tenpenny, I pledge to you and everyone watching us that none of this conversation will be edited, censored, removed, or banned, and that anyone in the world can watch the full version of this episode free at freedomplatform.tv/Tenpenny. Thanks to the generous donations of over 34,000 people around the world, we affectionately call the London Real Army. For anybody wanting to become a founding member of the Digital Freedom Platform, you can visit freedomplatform.tv/give to donate and fight with us on the front lines to protect our human rights. Here at London Real, we've been a platform for free speech since 2011. And Dr. Tenpenny, I'm super excited to have you here today. Maybe we jump in and talk about censorship, because over the last 48 hours, we have seen some pretty incredible things happening across these those social media platforms, these trillion-dollar technology companies, they've really been cleaning house when it comes to people talking about hydroxychloroquine. I also just got off the phone with Del Bigtree, who was deplatformed completely from YouTube without any warning. He says he's one video away from being completely taken off Facebook. This is getting really serious. At the same time, I feel like they're kind of exposing or being exposed for what's happening at the same time. Doctor, tell me, what do you see happening, and what can you tell me that you're seeing on the inside around this censorship, specifically around this therapeutic?
It's pretty interesting, Brian, because this drug has been around for decades. It's been used in millions and millions of doses all around the world. It's been prescribed and administered to children. It's been prescribed as a prophylactic to prevent infections. The side effect profiles are minimal when used in appropriate doses over appropriate periods of time. It's the heavy-handedness of government that suddenly has decided to fabricate studies, have skewed the data, have done everything that they possibly can to shut down the physician's right to prescribe an off-label medication for their patients that could cure them and keep them from dying. I mean, hydroxychloroquine is a drug they call it an ionospore. And what that is a type of compound that moves ions from outside the cell to inside the cell. So one of the mechanisms of action of this particular drug is it helps to move zinc from outside the cell to inside the cell. And then what the zinc does is it inhibits enzymes that can stop the replication of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It can also stop the replication of Zika viruses, HIV viruses, and a long list of others. So hydroxychloroquine, and it's my opinion of why they are coming after this with such full court press, is handguns and machine guns are rolling, is because this drug absolutely upends their economic model and their absolute necessity for this mandatory vaccine and 2 doses of mandatory vaccination and all of the social conditioning that's going along with all the tracking and everything to be vaccinated. It will completely upend their agenda if this drug is widely used.
Isn't this just so blatantly obvious that they're doing this? Because you said they've kind of scrubbed the web of anything pro hydroxychloroquine. I mean, doesn't this make this agenda almost obvious to people? And
well, I think it's more than almost. I mean, and I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and here in Ohio yesterday, I mean, how timely, right? I mean, America's frontline doctors have a press conference in front of on the steps of the Supreme Court on Monday. On Monday night, everything gets scrubbed off of the internet, off of Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, everybody who's even interviewed them. I mean, Trump Jr.'s Twitter account got blocked because of even mentioning it. The Dave from the X22 report got censored for 22 hours for mentioning it. Other people who've actually interviewed Dr. Gold and various other people who were at that conference, their accounts have gotten shut down or they've been put in like Twitter jail just for talking about it. And so the scrubbing effect of Google, Apple, Facebook, all of these other big tech companies is just absolutely out of control. And it's all over the place in terms of avoiding freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and just the doctor-patient relationship. These are physicians who've treated thousands of patients with this particular medication and have seen it to be curative. I mean, they've also seen it used prophylactically to prevent infection. And it's not only it's so obvious of what's happening here. And it's one of those good things, Brian, that I keep talking about what are the good things that have come out of this entire lockdown situation. Number one is this: people are just seeing it. That video of the frontline doctors had over 70 million views. 70 million views before it was taken down. And it was probably more than that. Those were the ones that were logged. So 70 million people are all going, here's physicians who are writing a prescription and doing it in real time, seeing their patients get well. Now they don't want anybody to know about it. And the very next day, so Monday and Tuesday, they get censored. On Wednesday, the state pharmacy board here in Ohio puts out this declaration, this declaration that says that all physicians are hereby prohibited from prescribing hydroxychloroquine even to patients who have been on Plaquenil for a long period of time, which is the trade name of hydroxychloroquine that has been used for decades for people that have rheumatoid arthritis for pain conditions. Now you have to actually get permission from the state pharmacy board to even prescribe a drug for a patient that's been on it for a long time. If you want to prescribe hydroxychloroquine, they have to be enrolled in a clinical trial. This came out just last night from the State of Ohio Medical Board. Now today, Governor DeWine, who's the governor of Ohio, has started to roll it back. He came out with a press release this morning and said, wait a minute, I'm agreeing with the guy who's the head of the FDA, who says that prescribing a medication should be a doctor-patient relationship, and it should be at the discretion of the physician of whether or not this medication is used. We've used drugs for off-label uses for as long as drugs have been around, Brian, and it's how physicians learn. It's how the drug gets expanded uses, is by trying it for various things. And with this known mechanism of action of this being a zinc ionophore, it suddenly explains why it works, why this malaria drug works well. But the key is the fact that it's also can be used to prevent other types of infections. It's going to upend their entire vaccine program about coronavirus and what they're trying to do to mandate vaccines and to mandatorily vaccinate everybody around the world.
Who is stopping it from being prescribed? Like, is there a they out there? Is there someone that's nationally doing it? I mean, obviously the social media companies are shutting things down in a strange coordinated effort. I mean, these companies, it's illegal for them to collude, and yet they all seem to strike at the same time to do this, and yet they probably would never even admit to doing it. I don't think they made an announcement of doing it. They also did it right when they were being summoned by Congress. I mean, one of the congressmen brought it up last night to Facebook, to Zuckerberg. He said, no, that was Twitter. We didn't actually do anything, which was actually a lie, because Instagram blocked, PragerU, that had posted that same video of that doctor on the steps of the Supreme Court. But who's actually coordinating the lack of, or it not being prescribed? It's not the CDC, it's not the FDA, or is it?
It's the FDA.
Okay.
It's the FDA who's now said that they've looked at the studies and the side effects far outweigh the benefits. And so therefore, physicians should not be using it for this. And there's no benefit from it from COVID-19 patients. There's no efficacy studies that have shown that this actually blocks the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is, and again, it's a lie. And then the level up from that, I think it was last night or this morning, Bill Gates came out with another video that said, the big tech companies need to move faster. They need to move faster to shut down all this misinformation about hydroxychloroquine. So I really kind of would like to know, and I don't really know the answer to this, but who's Bill Gates' handler? Who's upstream from him?
Yeah, well, we need to talk about that and maybe educate some people that don't know all the links here. Why would the FDA do this? In your opinion, where does this come from? Does the FDA have vested interests in the vaccine? Do they have people above them that are controlling them? Is it that it's an election year and Pharma is donating to people? Trump has made some posts recently saying Pharma's going after him because he's been lowering drug prices. What do you think is happening here?
The answer to what you just asked me is yes, and yes. So the FDA has long been nothing more than the handmaiden, the signature portion to the pharmaceutical industry. Several years ago, I don't remember exactly what year this is. I'm going to say it's within the last 7 to 8 years. The FDA created a fast tracking program for the pharmaceutical industry, where if they wanted a drug moved to the head of the line in terms of the FDA approval process, they could pay a fee to the FDA to move that drug forward faster. I believe the last time I looked that somewhere around 30%, maybe even more, of the FDA's annual budget comes from these fast track fees that the pharmaceutical industry pays. So there's always money involved with it if you just pull back the curtain and start looking for it. The FDA has always been just a signature sign off. When they have like CBER meetings or ACIP meetings, which is when the CBER meetings is when they decide that they are going to move forward with the original clinical trials, the animal trials look safe enough to move forward to the next level of vaccine or drug testing. It's always a sign off. They're like with hydroxychloroquine, they created this COVID panel, and something like 14 out of 17 of the representatives on this panel were representatives from Gilead Pharmaceuticals who are trying to make remdesivir I can never say that drug right, but they are really trying to make this other drug, this very expensive drug, over top of hydroxychloroquine. So they're shutting all of these things down in every possible way, preventing physicians from prescribing it, preventing patients from getting cured from it. We don't want to make it readily available. We're going to have the FDA tell all the state medical boards that if your doctors are prescribing it, they could be, unless they write into their into their patient's notes that you have been advised that this drug could kill you, then they would be open to liability and perhaps medical malpractice. I mean, they are like surrounding this on every possible level, particularly coating over the top of it with mainstream media, letting patients know, oh, this drug isn't safe, we shouldn't be taking it, when it's completely safe and it's preventative and curative. But again, it's all because of the fact of the mechanism of action of how this medication works. Actually shuts down the replication process of these viruses, and it makes the vaccines unnecessary. And the machine is moving forward at full tilt to get this vaccine to market in less than 18 months. They've done it under EUA's Emergency Utilization Authority so that they can do it without any liability. They can fast track it past animal studies. They can get it to market in 18 to 24 months when it usually takes at a minimum 5 years. No adequate testing, complete liability protection. And if suddenly a cheap, readily available drug comes into their primary markets, which is the US and the EU, and upends their entire vaccination program, no wonder they're coming at this with guns a-blazing.
Wow. Now, tell me about the social media companies and the digital platforms. Why are they involved?
I'm sure that they are they're all like sisters hand-holding sisters in this entire program. I mean, the tech companies are going to be all involved in the contact tracing. They're going to be involved in like the COVID-19 apps and things like that are going to be on your phone. I mean, all that tracing stuff is going to run through social media. I'm sure there's a lot of monetary things that are going on in the background. I mean, all the things that Google has developed with China in terms of like the social credits. I mean, in terms of how you're going to be able to access the internet. You're going to have to pay a fee to access it. You're going to have to pay a fee to get tested and keep your app updated so you can go into primary places of work and entertainment and restaurants and things like that. So the tech industry is all on the back office, on the back side of this, all related to making sure that they're tracking us and tracking our vaccination status.
Right. And I watched an article today about this thing called a trust marker that is almost like this almost like a credit card payment transaction piece that kind of has a wireless piece to see if you have been vaccinated. And then that would allow you to do things, go places, board flights, et cetera. I mean, it's just all hard to believe when I watch that, but it's happening in front of our eyes. Tell me about the vaccine. For people that have joined us, and this is the first time that they're maybe hearing that there may be something bad about a vaccine, because all we see is front page on the papers in the England here as well, in America. We're working on the vaccine. We're having success with the vaccine. Here's another $2 billion for the vaccine. Oxford's having success. Moderna's having success. And then occasionally we see something posted on Instagram or something where there was that, classic interview with Gates where someone was questioning him about, some side effects that some of the people were having on these tests. Walk people through why a vaccine isn't necessarily what we want and why it can be dangerous.
Well, we could spend several hours on that one, but but we'll narrow it down to just the COVID-19 vaccine, because we could address from your question, every single one of the vaccines about why they're not safe, why they cause problems, and why they have a long list of side effects that's generally not reported by the mainstream or by your primary care physicians. But with this COVID-19 vaccine, what they're calling it, it's really a vaccine against the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And, even though we use those two things interchangeably like they're synonyms. They're not. I mean, SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus, like my name is Sherri and your name is Brian. And it's the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes a syndrome, which is a complex of symptoms that is identified as COVID-19. But because I think it's easier to say COVID-19, we start to use those two things interchangeably. But what we're trying to do is develop a vaccine that will prevent the SARS-CoV-2 virus from causing an illness inside of a human being. And the problem is that in order to do that, they're going to have to use some of the genetic material from inside of that RNA virus, and they're using messenger RNA, which is a very specific type of genetic material in part of these vaccines. And they're talking about encoding the virus with various things that could like be turned on later. Several people, and there's been a lot of people who suspect that maybe those turned on later things could be activated by EMFs or 5G. I mean, there's just a lot of nefarious things about this virus that is not conspiracy theory. I mean, you just have to go and look at the application process of what they're doing. They're actually talking about using all kinds of different adjuvants in it, like ASO3, which is made by GlaxoSmithKline, which is a horribly, horribly toxic adjuvant. They're talking about using perhaps fresh aborted fetal cells to grow the virus in so that fetal DNA will end up in the vaccines. They're fast-tracking a vaccine that has never, ever been used before in humans. In fact, whenever they've tried to develop a coronavirus vaccine, which they have been working on since SARS, which is in 2002, every time they've tried to develop a vaccine against a coronavirus, which is a family of 36 viruses, 7 of those viruses are known to infect humans, and the rest of those viruses are known to infect animals, reptiles, birds. They can all be carriers of coronaviruses. So coronaviruses are really, really pervasive. They're a big family of viruses, at least 36 of them that we know. So it's not just one virus, it's a family of viruses. And they've been trying to develop a vaccine to protect against infection and illness from this family of viruses since 2002. And one of the more recent studies that I quote frequently comes from 2012, that the conclusion of the study was we must proceed with great caution to develop coronavirus vaccines for humans because of the accelerated autoimmunity and the type of reverse antibodies that are developed from this vaccine that actually make the infection worse, and in experimental animals have made them seriously ill or they have died when they got re-exposed to the virus after they were vaccinated. So there's a plethora of studies out there dating all the way back to 2002 that shows that the development of coronavirus vaccines has been deadly and has never been approved by the FDA because they could never get it past the animal studies. And now suddenly, because of the 2005 PrEP Act, which gives them complete liability protection, and because of the 2003 Project BioShield legislation, which gave them something called an EUA, an Emergency Utilization Authority, which means they can develop a vaccine, a drug, a medicine, a technology, a software, all of those things called a covered countermeasure. They can get that under the umbrella of the 2005 PrEP Act with complete liability protection, including fast-tracking it past the animal studies into human trials. So why would they ever want to do animal studies since they already know what the outcomes are? They're not good. Well, because we've got this liability protection and we can get it to the place where it's safe enough. Whoever decides that, I don't know about safety. The FDA just came out last week and said, if it gets to where it's effective 50-50, that if we give this vaccine, maybe 50% of the people will keep from getting sick, then we'll approve it. They just lowered that to saying now if it's 30% effective from keeping people get sick, we're going to release that all out onto the public. No animal studies. Animal studies killed people. We know that it's going to be fast-tracked into human trials. It's really, really dangerous.
And I think with some of was it the rhesus monkey studies here in Oxford where we found that when they got reinfected, it was more dangerous for them? I think that's what you were talking about. But they're already doing phase 3 human clinical trials in America with the Moderna, right? I mean, when I read those reports, I'm always surprised that it's already in humans. Then, you know, there was that famous interview with Gates where they were asking about some of the side effects. I mean, What have we seen so far? And it just feels rushed and it feels dangerous to fast track science.
It's very rushed, and it's extremely dangerous to fast track science, and it's extremely, extremely dangerous to fast track this. And so I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head of what the ratios were, but it seems as though I remember hearing or reading that somewhere around 35% of people in that first human trial from Madera had serious enough side effects that they either dropped out of the study or they were hospitalized from severe side effects. And even though it was a small group of people, the FDA said, oh, it was just small, we can move this forward. Again, there's the FDA being the handmaiden of the pharmaceutical industry who's beholden to big tech and the Gates Foundation and everybody at weforum.org. I mean, if people thinks that this sounds just like crazy making, just go and do a little bit of research at weforum.org and see what's actually there. It's a massive website. The sister site is intelligence.weforum.org, and it shows every industry, every interface, every interchange, how they brought COVID-19 to market. There's even a little 4-minute video that says that we have been working on this for 50 years, 50 years, and we've finally gotten it to the place where we can move forward and create the world that we want, which should make everybody stop and say, who's we? Who's the we that wants this world? And we think our world was pretty good before all this stuff started. I mean, look back at the beginning of 2020, it was like probably one of the best portions in time that we've had in a long time. Who's the we that's trying to create all of this?
How much money is at stake here with a vaccine? Like, how much money will that make for someone, whoever gets it, develops it, corners it, and then forces people to take it multiple times, maybe multiple versions, maybe over years or decades?
Multiple trillions of dollars, Brian. Multiple trillions. Because it's not only just the vaccine that they're saying, well, it doesn't create a very robust antibody response, so maybe we have to give this to you every year like a flu shot. And we want to develop this for every human on the planet. Gates has said that more than once. And it's not just one shot, it's two. Because the general vaccine protocol is you get one shot, which sensitizes you, and the second shot supposedly locks in a robust antibody response. So 7.7 billion times two, I mean, that's, over 14 billion. And if it's $10 each, and then it goes on and on year after year after year. So that's just the vaccine portion. That's just the manufacturers. That's just the sales reps. That's just whoever buys it in wholesale and sells it retail. But the real money is to be made not only on the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, but on every single vaccine that's currently approved on the market. The real money isn't in the vaccine. The real money is in the drugs that we get to sell you when you start to develop side effects of asthma, allergies, eczema, ADD, ADHD, insulin-dependent diabetes, autoimmune diseases, neurological problems, seizure disorders, a long list of things like alopecia and depression and headaches and severe eczema that's not controlled by everything. The real driver to the economic piece is through the vaccine. The vaccine, when you start getting sick, sends you to the doctor, then to the specialist, and then the super subspecialist, where then they order more and more and more tests, which you get more and more and more drugs. So the vaccines, even on the front end, as much as this is going to be multiple billions, and in my opinion, multiple trillions of dollars to vaccinate every person in the world multiple times, the real money is on the back end driver of the technology of tracking and making sure that you have this vaccine, and on the drugs that we get to sell when you start to develop side effects.
Wow, it sounds like some kind of a bad horror movie that never ends. How is Bill Gates involved, and why is Bill Gates involved in this whole process?
I'm not sure what at the early stages of this, say 25 years ago or more, what was the impetus for him to get his head and his money and his wife all wrapped in around the whole vaccine issue. I don't know if somewhere back in his place in time that he really bought into the fact that vaccines are good and they save lives, and so he was going to move into that space no matter what. I don't know if it's because there's technology involved with it, and now that this whole thing of contact tracing and tracking and downloadable apps and all those things, I don't don't know what the history is of that. I mean, the Corbett report, James Corbett has put out a 4-part series about the whole background on Gates. And I admit I've only watched the first 2. So there may be more information in there that really sort of spells out how Gates got his head so involved and his money so involved in the vaccine industry. But when he put up $10 billion with a B at beginning of 2010 to make 2010 to 2020 the decade of vaccines, and then it was actually the one who founded Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccination and Immunization, which is just a very nefarious organization that works with the World Health Organization and UNICEF in terms of being the economic piece between countries and UNICEF and the World Health Organization. They're sort of like the slush fund where they put the money through, and Gavi was funded by the Gates organization to get competitive cooperation working inside of the vaccine industry the way that it was working inside of the tech industry. So that's kind of, Gavi was formed, I think, around 2005, 6, somewhere in that area, and then became the main player in the decade of vaccines between 2010 and 2020. And so, Gates has sort of painted himself out to be this great philanthropist saving the world with all these vaccines. This is the same guy who does a TED Talk and tells you that the world is overpopulated, and if we play things just right, the vaccines can only do so much to decrease the population. This is the same guy who wants to save you with a vaccine. I mean, talk about, cognitive dissonance just in his own personal messages. But if you look back at the Rockefeller messages and how Rockefeller was such a nefarious guy, and they started to reposition him into being the great philanthropist, even though the money behind the scenes was it continued to go for pretty nefarious things.
But he's got so much money and influence that he is dictating public policy to a certain extent.
More than a certain extent, he's actually doing it. I mean, there was just a meeting, I think last week or maybe the week before, with 400 leaders here in the U.S. that were mayors of major cities and governors, and the meeting was held by Gates. What gives, how does he get that platform? This unelected official who hides behind a foundation. So therefore, because foundations, as we know on a global level, operate at a different set of rules and laws. And so he's got this layer of protection by being this philanthropist behind his foundation. Because the question I've often asked, Brian, and I don't know the answer to this, but it's like, but people like George Soros and Bill Gates and some of the other cast of characters, knowing what we do know about them and knowing that there's a whole bunch more that we don't know in the general public, why can't they just be picked up and put in jail? I think a lot of people would like to have an answer to that.
They have a lot of money and they want to do something, in this world. That's when I look at both of those gentlemen, and, this is their next project. Bill built a company called Microsoft, and Soros built an incredibly profitable, sometimes dubious, trading company and money-making company. And now they want to do something else. And, Gates can write big checks. I mean, I don't know how big Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is, but could be up near 100 billion or something like that. They've got Buffett's money. They've got all this stuff. So, he can cut a couple checks for $1 billion here and $1 billion there to go try some vaccines. And I guess he gets people's attention. It's fascinating to watch. And I want to know who's doing vaccines PR, because the whole world, including me, honestly, I'll be honest, about up until 4 months ago, thought a vaccine was almost a panacea. It was this kind of a God-given cure-all that would solve problems on a 100% accuracy rate, right? 100% it would work. Watch a movie like Contagion. It's this innocent little saline nasal spray, and then you're fine, and everyone's fine, and it's happily ever after, and puppy dogs and unicorns. And yet, when I go down the rabbit hole with people like you and Robert Kennedy and Dr. Buttar and all these people, I find out that, man, there's a lot more going on. It's pretty salacious. It's very dangerous. There's lots of chemicals we're pumping in people's bodies without any type of trials. And I've got my 75-year-old dad saying, why would I take a vaccine that's never been tried on a 75-year-old man before? I got my wife saying, why would we give a vaccine to our children? And these are good questions. But when you see it on the front page of newspapers, I just get a smile on my face, because most of the public, Sherri, doesn't know the truth about vaccines. And of course, why would they? Because I can't post a single video on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook with that word, or I'll be deplatformed.
Yeah, I want to address that, but I want to make just a comment about what you said about these guys writing big checks. Because when you've got that much money, it's not about money anymore. It's about power and control. I mean, if you've got, all of Maslow's hierarchy, right? You've got shelter, food, clothing, every major toy you can buy and sell, countries, literally. You've got more money than the gross domestic product of probably 50% of the countries in the world. It's not about money anymore. It's about power. It's about control. And it's a different type of mindset. And it's very hard, I think, for the general people like you and me and our listeners to get your head around that. Because it's a different level of thinking. It's really a pathological, psychopathic type of thinking that you just can't get your head around, that it's not about money. It's about power and control and manipulation. And so that sort of leads into answering your question about who's doing vaccine PR. Because we've got a multi-generational indoctrination of money, power, and control that goes all the way back to Jenner, that goes all the way back to 1799 when Jenner put forth his first paper in the UK to try to convince people that by scraping pus off of cows and off of the bottom of infected horse feet, that somehow injecting that into little babies was a good thing. And the whole myth of if we inject you with a virus that we call it cowpox because milkmaids got it on their hands from milking cows, that if we inject that into your body, somehow that's going to prevent you from getting smallpox. All of this was theory. The original papers that Jenner put forth in the UK were a mockery. Most of the physicians and people said, this is total nonsense. Until they got into the doctors' brains that were in Parliament and they were able to have control and lots of money and power is where from the very inception of the vaccine industry started. Until we had the first mandatory vaccination laws in the UK in 1853. The first compulsory vaccination law was passed in 1853 in the UK. Money, power, control, government, physicians in government. The physicians felt like this was the first procedure that they really could do something with and perhaps affect public health and get paid well to do it. It started from there. And in that exact same year, in 1853, we started the first anti-vaccination movement called Our Baby's Battle. And it started from parents whose children died from gangrene and died from sepsis from the filthy, dirty smallpox vaccine. So from the very beginning in 1853, and then you roll it forward to 3 more levels of compulsory vaccination into the early 1900s. Then you look at 1940 when we developed antibiotics and the American Medical Association started and the pharmaceutical industry in the 1950s started gaining money and power. And then in 1986 when we passed the National Vaccine Childhood Compensation Act, which gives the pharmaceutical industry complete liability protection for their dirty, faulty products, which then led to the ramp up of going from 3 vaccines in 1985 to multiple doses of 17 vaccines in 2020, and all the money, power, and control that's happened. So that's the mini version of the historical backdrop of who does vaccines marketing, vaccine PR. It's been from the very inception, Brian, and to me, this is why physicians have such a hard time getting their head around vaccines are bad and cause harm, because from the very beginning, it was woven into the development of physicianhood. We didn't start having medical schools as we know them today until the early 1920s, and that didn't really take root until the 1960s. And from the very beginning of physician education, it was interwoven with vaccines are good, they save lives from the very beginning, so when you start to tell them, wait a minute, maybe we ought to rethink this, it causes this cognitive dissonance in their brain that they just can't deal with. And if they walk into their patient chart room in the morning or rip up in their electronic medical record and go, wow, look at all these side effects, asthma, allergies, ADD, SIDS, seizure disorders, cancer. I played a role in that by injecting foreign matter into babies that I refused through my stubbornness and an arrogance to even investigate. Most physicians can't deal with that. It's easier to just ignore it, say it's not true, call it anti-science, tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, and continue to do what they do because it's woven into the DNA fabric of being a physician.
Yeah, and the public's fabric as well. I mean, I was the same way. And it's funny when I bring this up with people, whether they're doctors or not, they have that initial reaction like, oh, that's crazy. That's crazy. And it's like, well, why don't we just have a quick discussion about it? What about these side effects? What about this liability thing? What about this? They actually don't even want to hear it, which makes it's almost been indoctrinated like a religion, really.
It's a religion. It's genuflecting to the school of medical mysticism. Medical mysticism is believing something's going to do you good, whether actually it does the opposite. It causes you harm. It's like telling, a devout Christian, trying to convince a devout Christian that God doesn't exist. It's like, we have a multi-generational, 200-year multi-generational indoctrination about vaccines. Look at the polio vaccine. The polio vaccine came out in 1954, 1955. That was 60 years ago, and we still have young parents who believe that if their kids don't get vaccinated against polio, that they're going to get paralysis and die, even though the Western Hemisphere has had no wild polio since 1994. I mean, we still have this multiple, and when I say to the general public, things like, if I say the word polio, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
For me,
Analysis,
like handicapped kids,
iron lung, March of Dimes. That was 1950. 70 years ago, Brian, we've got 3 generations of people so the propagation machine, the propaganda machine keeps it going. There were only like 100 cases of wild polio in the entire world in 2007 and 18, and there's more side effects being caused by the oral polio vaccine than is the real cases of polio. And polio is not a synonym for paralysis, and people that do get some level of paralysis, more than 60% of them have complete recovery within 2 years. So we put our focus, just like on COVID-19, and the syndromes of the people who have died, because yes, some people have died from this virus, or from complications of the treatment, or from mismanagement of the treatment, or not appropriately treating them with hydroxychloroquine. Yes, some people have died from this pathogen. Well, guess what? You can list just about any pathogen that infects human beings, and some people have died. Some people got polio. So we make the whole industry about this tiny little number of people that have died, instead of looking at the vast majority of people who have not.
And I'm glad we're talking about this because, again, if people haven't heard this narrative before, or even if they've heard it once before, you can go a little bit deeper and really start to ask yourself, is the vaccine the answer? Because we're all being corralled into this one area of the vaccine's the solution. And I want to talk a little bit more about how we're being corralled. And I see 2 major ways. One is the data that's being thrown at us. I see it on the damn front page of the New York Times every day, of the positive testing data that maybe you can talk about, the PCR test and the real-time PCR test. And of course, masks, which you are really an expert in. And we've actually put the link below on a mask study that you just sent me. I think people can click it, or it's on freedomplatform.tv/Tenpenny if you want to go there. And because it's these things that they're going to use to ultimately get us to take this vaccine, I believe. Let me start with the testing and the data. Talk to me about what we don't understand about that, because if I go to the average person in America and say, look, all these tests are up, then they're going to say, oh no, something's wrong. I better change my behavior. Why is that not necessarily the right thing to do?
Well, the testing has been faulty from the very beginning. I mean, from the very beginning, they were finding these Q-tips contaminated with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And when the first time that I heard that it came out of Germany, and I think it was Slovakia, that they did those testings, and then the CDC's testing Q-tips were not valid because they didn't have the right reagent. When I started finding that these testing kits were contaminated, I said, well, that's going to do one of 2 things. Either when they skewer your nose and go way back here into your throat to take this swab, either it's going to deposit the virus and make you sick, or it's going to ensure that every single test we do is positive, or maybe both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And so from the testing from the very beginning was really faulty. PCR testing, I want to say something about the nasal swab, because if this virus is so contagious and so spreads so easily and is so highly infectious that we have got to wear a mask even outside when we're walking our dogs, then why do they have to skewer the back of my throat to find it? Can't I just sneeze on a Q-tip or something? I mean, isn't that enough to just go on a Q-tip and let them test it? Isn't that going to be enough? Why do they have to do this in really super invasive testing that they do with this Q-tip that's like this long and goes way into the back of my throat? So that, just the testing procedure itself, I find faulty. The Q-tips were faulty. The testing with PCR testing, there's 2 types of PCR testing.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.